La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seul.
Hello everybody, my name is Vincent Emerly, working for Hero Electronics in Switzerland. I'm happy to welcome you today at this webinar with nice topic of mitigate security risk and reduce manual work with Puppet and Tenable. You will learn how to use Tenable vulnerabilities outputs to feed Puppet remediate and automate the remediation of the vulnerabilities. Thomas Queni from Tenable will begin this webinar with some words about Tenable, and then Ross Lewis and Morgan Lilly from Puppet will hand over with the presentation and the demonstration. If you have any question, feel free to send it via the chat, and we will have time for question and answer at the end of the presentation. Thomas, you can hand over.
Thank you very much, Vincent. So good morning also from my side. My name is Thomas Cooney. I'm a security engineer with Tenable, responsible for Switzerland and Austria. And when I first heard that we will do this webinar together with Puppet, I thought that's really a good idea. So I'm really enthusiastic about this collaboration, about this technical integration. And it's not just a matter of saying so, I really am, because if you have ever heard me speaking on webinars and conferences, I always say, if you do vulnerability management only to have a list of vulnerabilities, basically that's no good. You really need to do something about the vulnerabilities you find. You need to have proper workflows in place to do something about the vulnerabilities, to mitigate them, and then to check that the mitigation really worked. So if you don't have workflows, if you don't have remediation, you cannot call it vulnerability management. Then it's just vulnerability scanning. And even more so, you do not only need workflows, but I think you need proper workflows. What do I mean with that? If you look at the vulnerability landscape today, you will see that almost 2/3 of the vulnerabilities are high or of high or critical severity. And that means the majority is really, really important. So you do not know where to start with. And if you base your remediation workflow on data like that, it's going to be really difficult, because if the system tells you that 2/3 are very important, you don't know where to start. So I just want to say that it's really important to have proper data being fed into the remediation workflow. And that's where Tenable can really help, because we have the best vulnerability data on the market, meaning that we have the largest coverage of CVEs, and we do have the best mechanisms to prioritize your vulnerabilities, so you really know at any given moment what is the best thing to do, with what measure can I reduce the risk the most. And that's really how Tenable can help in this vulnerability management workflows. And with that, I hand over to Ross to learn more about the remediation part.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you everyone for joining today. My name's Ross Lewis. I manage enterprise accounts across EMEA at Puppet, and I'm joined today by Morgan. So over to you, Morgan.
Hi there, I'm Morgan. I'm a customer success engineer here at Puppet. And yeah, I'm here today to demonstrate Puppet Remediate to you all.
Brilliant, thanks Morgan. So I guess our aim today is to share with you some insight into what we see as a very progressive problem space that we also see as ripe with opportunities, and essentially how Puppet combines with Tenable to efficiently complete the loop on vulnerability management by a refined and fixed solution. So let's look at the agenda quickly. So we're going to start with the background context to really help you with, the correct positioning for this solution. Then we're going to explore some of the typical challenges and implications around remediation. We'll move into the demo, so Morgan's going to take that. There will be some time for some questions. And then finally, we're going to show some information on how you can partner with us and help your customers with this solution. So for the benefit of those that don't already know Puppet, Puppet is an infrastructure automation platform. At a high level, what we do is help IT operations and infrastructure teams who are responsible for managing, changing, and fixing their IT estate. So just providing automation capabilities to streamline that process and make it more secure. Now, Puppet Remediate really came about from our enterprise customers coming to us and asking us for help with CVE remediation. They explained that their InfoSec colleagues, the majority of whom were using Tenable to scan their estates for security vulnerabilities, would send over an Excel sheet including thousands of vulnerabilities to be remediated on either a weekly or monthly cadence. And what we found was that the real big challenge here was that remediation teams responsible for obviously fixing those vulnerabilities had no efficient way to stay up to date with the long list and growing list of vulnerabilities, or also to address those critical vulnerabilities that occurred in between their usual patching cycles. So we took all of this information, we went out and carried out some extensive research, and what we found was that this was a huge and common problem right across the entire enterprise landscape. So if you look at the three core issues in the middle of the graph here, these were largely driven by a significant gulf in the innovation available to remediation teams, as opposed to their better equipped colleagues in InfoSec. So such as those, using the capabilities from Tenable to automatically scan and prioritize their CVEs. So what this means is that, for remediation teams, today's practices are really unable to keep up to pace with the exponential volume of CVEs being identified. So at Puppet, we built a solution to help remediation teams fix and overcome these challenges. Now, before we dive into Puppet Remediate, it's important that we cover off the split in responsibilities, which will really help you with the correct positioning here. So Tenable customers on the InfoSec teams are, of course, responsible for finding and prioritizing the CVEs, and then they hand over the data to infrastructure and operations teams who are responsible for remediation. Now, segregation of duties is really important for us to focus on, particularly if you're managing organizations that operate in heavily regulated industries, such as finance and healthcare. Now, this compliance requirement means that the same team cannot be responsible for finding and fixing the vulnerabilities, all because of the associated risk implications that would come with that. Now, it's worth noting that many other verticals, even those in less regulated spaces, will follow the segregation of duties, as it's widely seen as good practice to help manage risks. Now, from the extensive research that we carried out, we structured all of the data that we found to produce this typical workflow. And what we found is this resonates very strongly across all enterprise verticals. And for those salespeople on the call today, it's a really great tool for you to use when opening up customer and prospect conversations. Now, if we have a look at the pain points here, after Tenable has scanned the estate and sent over the vulnerability data to operations and infrastructure teams, this is really where all the problems start, and definitely start to intensify also. So if we look at the first 4 pain points, now these all really relate to IT being restricted to manual ways of working, which will significantly slow the process and create a huge amount of risk. And if you consider the endless stream of CVEs being identified by the vulnerability scanners, it's easy to see why vulnerability remediation for the majority of operations teams is often viewed as an impossible task. So we've of course just briefly outlined the problem space. Now let's dive into something and look a little closer to when things actually go wrong. Now the Equifax example is probably one of the most well-known and significant data breaches in recent time. But when we look at the contributing factors, they do perfectly align to the vulnerability problems that we have uncovered here and just briefly explained in terms of remediation. And what happened in this particular example is that the Equifax InfoSec team had a process whereby they emailed Excel documents consisting of thousands of vulnerabilities over to the operations teams to fix. However, they forgot to update the email contact list after a new remediation engineer had joined the organization. This meant that the engineer never received the vulnerabilities that he was responsible for fixing, and this eventually led to the breach. Alongside this, the Equifax example is also very relatable to the recent Ponemon Institute findings. Now, if we look at these, they're a really good way to understand why enterprises are increasingly looking not just to only improve their vulnerability remediation process, but also to have a tool or a solution that can quickly address those critical vulnerabilities that will occur in between their patching cycles. And because of the sheer volume and exponential growth here of the CVEs, automation will need to play a huge role for things to improve. So Morgan will be going through the demo, which will show this in more depth in a moment. But here's just a brief visual on where Puppet Remediate fits into this workflow. Now, it's really all about automating those middle steps to help remediation teams improve their efficiency. And one thing to keep in mind is a key USP for Puppet Remediate is the fact that customers can use task-based automation to actually remediate the CVEs, which is quite significant because the majority of tools out there tend to only find and prioritize the CVEs without actually providing a way to take action. And very quickly, here's some of our key wins so far. So many of these will use Puppet Remediate as a way to essentially kill the spreadsheets process, and also to enable their IT teams responsible for remediation to have a better visibility into which systems are vulnerable. We mentioned segregation of duties, and that's really important because across the enterprises, many IT teams or operations and infrastructure will not have access to the Tenable scanners. So the difference between the visibility on the InfoSec side and IT and operations is often very significant. So bringing that together in a programmatic way through integrating with Tenable is really important here. And with that, I'll hand over to Morgan to take you through today's demonstration.
Thank you very much, Ross. Everyone should be able to see my screen now. So yeah, as Ross said, I'm going to be taking you through a demonstration today of what Puppet Remediate looks like and what you can do with it and the information that it shows and how it shows it. So if I just go ahead and log in to console. So this is what you see when you first log in to Puppet Remediate. Now, as Ross discussed, a frequent method of vulnerability remediation that we see is the operations team being given a spreadsheet by the security team and being told to go through this huge list and make the necessary changes. As you can see already, this layout is considerably easier to understand and a lot more user-friendly for the operations team. So here we have our vulnerabilities dashboard, and this gives you an overview of this gives you an overview of your infrastructure, and you can see what needs changing and which are the worst culprits for the vulnerability situation. So as you can see here, we've got the different filters. So if we want to address our critical vulnerabilities first, we can go ahead and click on that. It'll filter by our most critical vulnerabilities, but we can also go through all the different settings to see which are high, medium, and low. And then without all those as well, we are able to see them in a list, and you can list them in order of risk, for example. So we can do that as well. You can also see along here, we have our top 5 most common vulnerabilities. So you can go through there. I've got quite a small demo environment, so we've only got 2, but in the cases where you can see your most common vulnerabilities across your infrastructure, you can go ahead and click that. Then if we go through along here, you can see the information we've got along the top. We have our complete list of nodes along there, as well as the nodes that we have that are vulnerable, the total number of vulnerabilities that we have, and the highest risk score for vulnerability, which as you can see here is 980. So that is out of 1,000. So that's a pretty high risk vulnerability, and probably one that needs addressing fairly quickly. As you can see, you can change any of these columns here by clicking those arrows. Your most vulnerable node has 105 vulnerabilities there, and I'll be going through the concept of accepted risks in a little bit. But tell you what, let's go through the actual process of performing a remediation. So let's have a look. Let's say we want to have a look at this one. So all this information has been imported by our scanner, which today I'm using Tenable.io, which is the cloud Tenable scanner. We can go ahead and click, and this is the information that it's been pulled in. So we can see the analysis here that's brought in for us, as well as the remediation that it suggests. There's also some more information up here. And there is kind of telling you here, so 50% of our infrastructure is affected, and it's a pretty high risk vulnerability. So now we can go down here and we can have a look. We can start ticking the nodes that we want to remediate. Now, if you have multiple ones here, just a point of conversation, you can actually pick which ones you want to change, but we're going to do obviously just the ones, which is all of them, and we're going to go ahead and run a task against it. So as Ross said, the remediation is task-based remediation. So you will pick the nodes and the vulnerabilities you want to remediate against, and then you will run the task against them that will fix it. So in this case, I'll just jump back actually. So this is a problem with the curl package, and then we've been told to update the affected curl packages. So we can go ahead and jump in, click run task, and then we can go ahead and click one of these tasks. Now these are the 4 out of the box tasks that come when you install Puppet Remediate, but it is possible to add your own. So these focus on some very kind of basic ideas of vulnerability remediation, as well as allowing you to bootstrap a Puppet agent for use with Puppet Enterprise. But they allow you to do managing services, executing shell commands, and managing the state of packages. And well, today we're going to be managing the state of the package. So go ahead and click that, select this task, and then we're going to choose what we want to do to the package. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade our curl package. Now at this point, there's some optional bits of information you can put in. So you can put in your package provider, so be that Yum, apt-get, or Chocolatey if you're using Windows. If you have a specific version, you can put that in there. Otherwise, you can just update to the latest and a comment. So for example, we could put remediating, and then we put in the reference in there. And then we click confirm details. The credentials that we need. So these are the SSH credentials for the specific node. Confirm those. And then we can go ahead and run the task, and it will start running our manage package task. This will take some time, so we won't wait for that to happen, but that is the process for remediating vulnerability. So as you can see, that kind of step from finding the vulnerability to remediating it gets a lot smoother. You can see it and you can fix it from within the console, and that's a really powerful tool to put in the hands of your operations team, no longer requiring to filter through this enormous spreadsheet and go through finding which problems need to be fixed, which ones don't, etc., etc. But with regards to not wanting to have a look, not wanting to go through a spreadsheet and working out what needs to be fixed, that brings me on to our accepted risks. So if we know, for example, I don't actually know if this one is one we can ignore, but we can probably assume it's okay for now. But let's say we know that we can't make any changes to the systemd package, systemd packages because they're in certain change freeze. There's certain changes we can't make. We can say, well, we know we're not allowed to make these changes on this specific node. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and accept that risk. Okay. And then you can put a name for it to identify it later. So change freeze means you can't update. And then we're going to go confirm accepted risk. So if we pop in here, you can see we've got our accepted risks at the top. So the identifier there, change freeze means we can't update this, and it will identify that the vulnerability has been accepted as a risk. So when, for example, security will come in and say, oh, why has this not been changed? Because, oh, we've accepted this risk for these reasons, and these are the vulnerabilities we've chosen to accept the risk from. On the subject of tasks, as I was talking about earlier, there is the ability to be able to write your own tasks and import those in, but also a community sharing platform called the Puppet Forge, which we use in our other products as well, is available to be able to download tasks and modules that can be uploaded to Puppet Remediate and allow you to execute those tasks to do certain things. For example, if there was a vulnerability based on, let's say, security policy on a Windows machine, you would be able to create a task, as I have done, to change the security policy of the machine to make it more secure, and that would fix that vulnerability. But for example, whenever a vulnerability comes up, you are able to write a module or have a look on the Forge to see if you can download any to fix it. It's like I say, 4 tasks out of the box, but there's plenty more that you can add as well. Now, as well as the vulnerability overview, there's a couple of other really useful tools that Puppet Remediate has. So we have our node overview. So this gives us an idea of what's going on with the nodes that we have connected. So which ones are accessible, which ones are not. As we can see, thankfully, all of ours are accessible and changes can be made against them. The idea of the operating systems on the vulnerable nodes, and some information here about which have vulnerabilities and which are accessible, etc. There is also our resources tab up here. So if we click on that, you can see we have information about our infrastructure. So how many nodes, how many packages, how many containers, etc. Now up here, we have information about any of our cloud infrastructure sources. As you can see, we don't have any on here. So I'm using our demo environment, which doesn't have any of these connected. But if you did, that information would be up there. And any nodes that have Puppet Enterprise on them are listed here as well. As you can see, we have a list of continuing information about which nodes have Puppet on, which have got an uptime of less than or greater than 24 hours, and which distributions are available. So I'm just using Linux today, but it would tell you if there was Windows as well. And a new feature which has come in the latest edition of Puppet Remediate, which is exciting for our Puppet Enterprise customers, is integration with Puppet Enterprise. So within Puppet Enterprise, you're able to upload your own tasks, your own workflows to be able to do those for different reasons other than remediation, or remediation if that's the process they use within Puppet Enterprise. We now provide the ability to integrate your Puppet Enterprise instance with Puppet Remediate, giving you the ability to import all the tasks that you have into Puppet Remediate, which allows you to kind of manage them through source control, have kind of change approval. So all the tasks that you know are okay from Puppet Enterprise can be brought into Puppet Remediate for use there. So you're not kind of doubling up on tasks that some are in Puppet Enterprise, some are in Remediate. They're now available through an integration. And another boon as well. So Puppet Remediate utilizes SSH and WinRM. If you were to integrate Puppet Enterprise, you have access to all your Puppet nodes with Puppet agents on them and can communicate and run tasks via that, rather than having to use SSH and WinRM. So another advantage there that comes with the Puppet Enterprise integration. And I think the last thing I just wanted to cover is something that customers would find quite useful and that I get asked about quite a lot is role-based access control, which is available within Puppet Remediate. So you can change, there are a series of groups that are available and you can change who has access to which groups. So as you can see, this is the admin users who have access to all, but you can choose who is able to accept risks, who is able to add credentials, sources, and tasks, and who is able to run tasks, remove them, remove sources, and remove credentials. So I know customers that are quite, want to have control over who makes what changes to the environment, and that is something you can do through role-based access control. So yeah, I think coming to my time. So we've that's a good sort of overview and summary of Puppet Remediate and everything you can do. And hopefully I've showed you how much easier it'll make people's lives rather than having to filter through a massive spreadsheet sent from security ops.
Good, thank you, Morgan, for the demonstration. It's a time for the question and answer. So if you have any question, feel free to go to the chat. I have already one question. Does the solution Puppet Remediate integrate with all Tenable products, or are there some restrictions?
So I can take that one. So we only integrate with Tenable's enterprise products, so Tenable IO and Tenable SC, just because of the strategic relationship that we've got and the focus being on enterprise organizations. So those are the two that we integrate with.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense also from a technical point of view, because only our enterprise products have the API which is necessary to integrate. So you cannot do it with Nessus alone.
Thank you. Another question, is Puppet Remediate a SaaS-based product or also on-premise solution?
Yeah, I'll take that. So Puppet Remediate isn't a SaaS product, no, it is installed locally. So yeah, it's not in the cloud, it's well, yeah, it's just downloaded onto your premises.
Okay, thank you. And last one, is Remediate available as a standalone product, or is it only an add-on to Puppet Enterprise? I think it should be standalone, according Morgan.
Yeah, that's correct, Vincent. It's yeah, so it's available standalone. Morgan run through, of course, the integration that we have with Puppet Enterprise, but new customers that are new to Puppet and not already using Puppet Enterprise take advantage of Remediate as a standalone product. And what we see there is really it's great for organizations that want to start automation and want to pick a very specific but impactful use case, in this case vulnerability remediation, to start there and then grow out through the rest of the automation use cases that Puppet provides.
Okay, good. Any other question? Otherwise, I think we reached the time. Maybe Conrad, will you say some words to finish this webinar?
Yeah, thanks, Vincent, of course. Can you bring up the slides again, maybe? So we have the partner slide I wanted to briefly cover.
Morgan, can you share the screen, change me as a presenter, please?
So my name is Konrad Lang. I'm Puppet's partner manager for the Germany, Austria, and Switzerland region, and I'm working closely with Vincent and the Arrow team. And if you enjoy the session and are interested in learning more about the topic and potentially becoming a Puppet partner even, the Arrow team and I will be more than happy to have a follow-up conversation with you about that, right? Depending on your aspiration and level of commitment, Puppet offers different levels of partnership, and those different levels provide a number of different benefits, like, for example, deal registration, trainings, field support, and so on. And of course, you can purchase Puppet like Tenable via Arrow as your distribution partner. Go to the next slide, please, Morgan. And besides the partner conversation, we are, of course, also happy to dive deeper into the solutions with individual demos and sessions for you jointly with our friends at Tenable, right? Just reach out. So on the next slide, I'm not sure it's not coming up here. you will also see links you can follow and reach out to in regards of demos, the demo requests and so on. So that was it from my side. Happy to follow up separately with you. Thanks for taking the time with us today. And yeah, back to Vincent.
Thank you everybody for joining us this morning. Feel free to contact us at Hero or Puppet if you have any question, and I wish you a good day.